I wanted to develop something that would allow me the opportunity to coach them for their basketball games, or even have them come to work with me and just create this lifestyle for my family. That's different. So that's really why I took the jump. Is I just couldn't live with not facing that risk and not knowing what the outcome could be if I would just bet on myself.
Yeah, dude, that's powerful. And tell us, we'll get more into the weeds of everything that you just said, but how's your first month been?
It's been
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what? Yeah. You know I be on a what?
Welcome everyone to the Fight Against Mediocrity podcast. Super excited to have Daniel Cannistraci. I pronounced that right.
Yep.
Okay,
Totally.
Perfect. So he's a real estate investor who resides in Northern California with his 3 young boys and wife. His passion for real estate has deep roots, though he has enjoyed the last 10 years in the corporate executive world, launching products across the globe. He's now venturing out. I think today's his 1 month mark to pursue his own passions and his own personal fight against mediocrity. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for creating this movement. Hopefully so many people are going to get behind.
Of course, dude, worldwide. Okay, man. So the reason I invited you on the podcast is because we had a conversation several months ago. And at that point you were still in the corporate 9-to-5. And then you messaged me, and as of a month ago, you started your own thing. And so I wanted to have someone. I talked to a lot of people who are in the spot of they don't like where they're at. They want to do something more. They want to start their own business, get into sales, whatever it is. But that jump seems so scary. So tell us about your journey over the last 10 years and what has led to your going off on your own.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think I very much was in that camp. I was super scared. I always had these passions behind, the scenes, but I would just kind of like push them off into the corner because, one thing is I was really good at what I did in the corporate world, and I kept climbing that ladder, and I kept wanting to rise to those occasions and take on those new challenges. And every new challenge came with a new title and a new pay increase. And what happens, whether you like it or not, a lot of times is your lifestyle will creep with, everything else. And not to say we were living extravagantly or anything like that. We were living very comfortably, and you just want to continue to provide that experience. And then, life gets busy. You have kids, you get married, things take different shapes and different colors. And so it gets scarier. Kind of one of the reasons why I took the leap is just, I was getting to the point where I was kind of maxed out. I felt like I was hitting the ceiling. For the last 10 years, I basically started as a product manager at a tech company. Started off at Apple and then kind of worked my way up to a Japanese company. I was traveling the world, getting promotions. By the time I left the Japanese company, I think I was director of sales for North America. So lots of travel involved with that. We were just starting to have kids. And I knew that I had to make a change. Just when I was thinking that, a startup company called me and offered me a VP of product for the company, which would oversee hardware engineering, manufacturing, and software development. Seemed like a great, amazing move. It was going to put me at home more often. And so I took it. And I was about 2 years in, and I was just like, I think this is all there is for me. I don't know that there's any more moves that I can make. I'm basically at the top of the level here. I tried everything that I knew how to try. It's not necessarily scratching that creative itch or fulfilling me personally. And the big thing for me is once we started having kids, I have three boys, 8 weeks, 3 years old, and 5 years old. I wanted to develop something that would allow me the opportunity to coach them for their basketball games, or even have them come to work with me and just create this lifestyle for my family. That's different. So that's really why I took the jump. Is I just couldn't live with not facing that risk and not knowing what the outcome could be if I would just bet on myself.
Yeah, dude, that's powerful. And tell us, we'll get more into the weeds of everything that you just said, but how's your first month been?
It's been crazy. So luckily I have a super supportive wife. We also are deeply rooted in our faith. We're Christians and we believe that everything happens for a reason. And it just feels like doors are being opened for us, and some other doors are being closed. And we're just trying our best to walk through the ones that are meant to be, and use discernment and wisdom as we kind of navigate this. But it's been crazy. I have one flip closing. I just wired some money for another one. I've got a couple of listings coming up. I'm a licensed realtor here in California. Also do some investment and flips. Also hold a contractor's license. We can get into that. So I'm hitting it from kind of all three different angles, and everything's kind of firing all cylinders right now. I think I was scrambling to get back in time to make the podcast because I was just running around.
So when you say you've got one flip closing, that's is it done being flipped or you're starting?
Yeah, so we are just about to go live on market in the next couple days. So we just finished all the work. I was just meeting with them to get the final touches, touch up paint, that kind of stuff squared away. So that's closing. I bought another one in Midtown Sacramento that I'm super excited about. It's like my dream flip. It's right in Midtown. It's going to be super cool. We're excited about that one.
What are you projected to make on your first flip?
Probably between 40 and 50K.
And what did you make a year before? You made a lot more. What did you make a year at your old job?
About $500,000. No, just kidding. We made $250,000.
$250,000 in a year. Take taxes and everything out of that. But that's so in 1 month, you did what would have taken you a fifth of the year to make.
You know, what's funny is I was talking to my wife about this today, and if we keep on this trajectory, luckily the one thing in California, it is a little bit crazy in terms of pricing. So we don't have to do a ton of volume to make good money, but I only need to do like a flip or two every quarter to really be on that same trajectory that I was on. Obviously that's not the intent. I really want to grow a business and grow a team. That's my, aspiration. I love leading people. I love managing people and developing people, but, that's kind of the trajectory it seems like we're on just in this first month. And, things can change. The market's kind of settling a little bit, but we're excited.
I love it. And what I want to emphasize for the listeners here is I know immediately there will be some people, and probably doesn't even matter to say this because those people probably aren't the ones that are going to take the leap, but some people will hear this and be like, oh, well, he was making $250K. He had this job. He already had his real estate license, and they could easily say that's why he was able to do that. But you set yourself up with that. That's not how it started, right? I mean, you worked for 10 years. Obviously, you worked your way up. And also what I want to point out is instead of just working and then going home and sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, you went out and got your real estate license. You have your contractor's license. You were putting in the work, which inevitably led to one day being able to cut ties and create your own economy. Tell us about that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect way of looking at it. I think if you have those aspirations, I always knew at some point this was going to come to fruition one way or another. So like you said, I was making those moves in the background to set myself up for the potential for these things to happen. And lo and behold, they did. And so I don't have this superhero story. Like I started at the bottom. I remember I started my own company. It was focused in fresh produce. We were creating scoreboards for different production facilities, and I would tell them about their production rates and their efficiencies and all these kinds of things.
That's
and that was my start.
Day job.
That was one of my very first jobs.
Okay.
And then I parlayed that into, the business didn't work out for whatever reason. I had some partners, things went a little south. That's fine. But I asked myself at that point in time, what do I want to do? I really respected Apple. I wanted to go work for them. So I took literally a contract position making $20 an hour. And I parlayed that. I just kept, growing myself professionally, always learning, always staying hungry, applying myself. To your point, if you want to carve out a life that's different in the fight against mediocrity, right? You have to be making these moves. You can't go home and watch Netflix. You have to go home and study. You have to go home and get on YouTube and listen to people like Ryan Pineda and yourself and learn what they're learning and try to apply it in your own way to your life. Read books, whatever it is, and try to find value in what others bring. And I think in today's world, there's no better time to do that with all the free content available on social and YouTube. And I mean, you can learn anything you want to learn. So I don't think there's any excuses not to learn new skills and not to develop yourself. Even if you have a very, rigorous 9 to 5 job. In my case, I'll just share my story. You would argue this was probably the worst time that anybody professionally would make this move. I just had a newborn baby.
Yep.
I was getting promoted at work. Like things were all going the right way. And I just decided to remove myself from that and take the risk. And I tend to be pretty risk adverse. So I'm telling your audience, if anyone can do it, I'm doing it, they can do it too. It's not, the secret sauce. You just have to be willing to take that risk. And of course, don't be foolish. Like you definitely want to have some savings so that you can afford yourself a few months of runway. That's obvious. But once you get that, you're good.
Yeah, totally.
The worst thing that can happen is you can fail and then you'll be right where you are now.
Yeah. Yes. Literally, that's so ironic because so often people are so scared to take the risk, but if they take the risk and it doesn't work out, they'll literally be at the exact same spot. A couple of things that you said that I thought were very important was you took the job at Apple. It was lower paying, I'm assuming, than you probably could have sought out other places, but you wanted the experience and the knowledge of working for Apple, right?
Yeah, that's right. This was about 10 years ago. And for me, I saw it as a big resume attention getter. So I intentionally sought out, hey, I'm going to work for a large corporation that's highly respected, and I'm going to parlay that into my next move. And it worked out beautifully. It's exactly what I thought. So I'd encourage people, when you're making moves like that, if even if it's a step backwards, but you think it'll transcend, 5 or 6 levels, definitely make those moves because it's just short term and you have to look at it that way.
Yeah, totally. It's and Rich Dad Poor Dad, he talks about it, take jobs that will teach you skills that you can use in the future. If you're looking for,
right.
Hey, what do I want to do in the future? What are the jobs you can use to get there? Another thing that you mentioned just the internal factors, hey, you were looking at a promotion. You just had a baby, which I agree. I mean, I could talk to someone and they could use every single thing that you just said as an excuse. But what you didn't mention that you also could have used as an excuse is the market right now in real estate. Interest rates just doubled essentially overnight. I mean, it's been a few months. Things are settling a little bit. But if you look for opportunity, you'll find it. But if you look for reasons and excuses, you'll find them. So tell us, you have the runway, you have the savings. What emotionally has this first month felt like?
I thought it was going to be a lot scarier than it was. I think we create the perception of fear and we let it guide us. But if you kind of grab things by the horns, and it's easier said than done, I'm learning this literally as we're talking, it's really not as scary as you think. And so I can tell you just in the last month, I've been so much more fulfilled. My boys love the fact that I'm home. I'm taking them to the flips with me. There's, sweeping the floors, whatever. It's been so fulfilling that even if, for a year or two, I had a pay decrease or whatever, I think I'm so much more happier and fulfilled than I was just pushing that. We say 9 to 5, but when you make it to that level, it is not 9 to 5. It is 24/7 and there are no breaks. And what I've learned, just climbing that ladder is they're paying you more and they're giving you new titles in exchange for more sacrifice. And I was reaching a breaking point where I was not willing to compromise my life or my family's life any longer. And so for me, that's really what I've learned in the last month is, it's not as scary and I'm more fulfilled and I should have done it sooner. That's the one thing that I wish I would have done. Now, at the same time, people will say, you should be grateful and lucky. And I am totally. Everything happens for a reason and everything's fallen in place. And so this is just my story. And I'm hoping that I can encourage other people to pursue their passion and dreams, even if it starts out as a side business and you're doing it in the evenings. Just do something.
Yeah, just listen to a pod. Tell us about the education that you put yourself through before you took the leap to quit your job.
I mean, you and I had, I think it was about 6 months ago, I had reached out to you, something like that. I've been following Ryan Pineda for a long time, and then his circle of people is getting wider and wider and wider. So just trying to absorb all of that, listen to all the different strategies that people are employing in real estate. You mentioned the market. So I definitely want to take that opportunity to encourage people, if there are listeners that are in the market that are afraid of it. The one thing that I say to people about the interest rates is they just normalized. Like 3% was never normal, number one.
No.
Number two, there's still so much scarcity on the market. And you would know this from your background. Builders can't build fast enough. And so the fourth factor is people have more equity than they've ever had in their lives, and they probably have a good refinance interest rate. So what does that mean? More scarcity, because people are going to have to live somewhere. So they're probably not going to list their house to go buy a more expensive house to have the same quality of life. My point in all of this is I don't know that this real estate bubble is bursting. I think it's just going to slow down and normalize, but it's still going to continue to grow. And one of the reasons I say that is because like Dave Ramsey, the most conservative guy ever, literally, like I think it was a week or two ago, said like, this is the cheapest time to buy a house in the next 5 years. So don't listen to me, listen to a guy like that who has 50 years of experience, 40 years of experience, whatever it is in this space that's known for being extremely conservative, and take it for what it's worth.
Yeah. And on top, that's money advice. I mean, people should have to pay for that advice right there. And then on top of that, a lot of builders, I think, are scared. And so they're slowing down production, which is going to decrease the supply even more. So anyways, it's all real estate. You can go into some of that stuff, but it is a great time to buy. If you're talking to someone and they hate where they're at and they want a similar lifestyle to what you're now living, I don't think, let me backtrack a second. You're probably not working any less than you were. Is that correct?
My brother-in-law called me. We were kind of texting back and forth. And he was saying, it feels like you're busier now than when you had your corporate job. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I guess the difference is I don't notice it. And I don't feel like I'm sacrificing my family because I'm here, I'm available. I might be taking calls here or there or looking at comps and running projections on properties, but like there's fleeting moments kind of in between the spaces where I'm able to fill in more time and be more present and be able to do things that I wasn't able to do before. So I don't necessarily notice, but it's probably true that I am working a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say the same, but I think the biggest difference is you're building your own dream versus someone else's. How does it feel as you're working each day, knowing that you're building your own business, your own dream, the work that you put in, the upside is all yours versus building someone else's dream? What's the difference there?
I love talking about the upside. I think like I have this quote that's been resonating kind of in my head for like it just kind of popped in my head one day for the last couple of months. And it's basically working for a corporation just allows you to tell their story, but being an entrepreneur allows you to tell yours. And for me, the story is so far, I left a great paying job to create this life for my family that I wanted to lead, that's set apart, basically breaking the social norms that we've been raised and brought up to do. Go get a 9-to-5, play it safe, put your money in a 401k, buy a house, all these normal things, right? And for me, that's just not enough. Like I want more. I want to create generational opportunities. I'm not just thinking about me. I'm thinking about my kids and their kids and what can we build that's going to, fulfill those needs as they arise later on. So that's just one thing that's kind of been, stepping out is now, having been a product leader and having to come up with all these unique selling points, we call them USPs, and value propositions and voice of customer to feed the engineering team. Like now I can do all of that stuff for myself. And it's really exciting because I was doing it for corporations, global advertising, and, playing in all these different markets around the world. And it's so much more genuine, I feel like, when I can do it for myself. And it really comes from a place where it means so much more.
Yeah, totally. And I think that translates directly to, I might be working more, but it doesn't feel like it because I'm building my dream. And so It doesn't feel like work. It feels like play and achievement, and fulfillment is the word you used. Okay. So with everything that you've just said, well, let me make sure I get my thoughts straight. I wanted to have you talk about for a second. A lot of times myself, and we've done it here on the podcast, we really put a negative light on the 9-to-5. And I think that's because it can feel so burdensome and like soul sucking. But I will say, and maybe this seems a little bit weird, I will say that if you're at a 9-to-5 with the intent of, I'm using this to learn, to later be able to build my own thing, I think it can be a great thing. So tell us, from working in 9-to-5 and in the corporate life, what skills did that give you to then, have kind of a boost as you start your own thing?
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I think that is the right way to look at it. I mean, that's essentially for the last couple of years how I've been looking at it. In my position specifically, I was running the P&L for the business unit. So I was very familiar with profit and loss and balance sheets. And I think all the stuff that you don't necessarily learn at university or whatever that you should be learning, but that's another conversation. They don't teach you how to run a business. So essentially, I was able to run a business without my money being at risk. And that's what it afforded me to do. I was able to kind of learn these skills and work with accounting and finance and figure out, with inventory and how to balance all of that, and work with the sales team to figure out, how to meet our quotas and how to pivot and create unique value propositions for customers and find things that would resonate in the market. And it's all skills that are valuable in this specific, even though they're not directly related because we're not talking about the same products. It's all the negotiations and all of the camaraderie and all the different tools and language that I've been able to develop in those experiences. So I wouldn't trade them. Like I said, I'm extremely grateful. I feel like I said, everything happens for a reason. And this was the natural progression for my life to take. And so I don't think anyone should feel bad or discouraged about a 9-to-5. But if you have this desire in your heart and you want to pursue it, start taking those little steps to set yourself up. I wasn't that intentional about taking those steps until the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
I had always done real estate as a passion. I got my license in 2014, but that was just to help my father. He's a contractor. He was doing flips. I was going to list his properties. We were going to keep more of the profits in the family. That was kind of the idea behind that. And then I started getting friends and family referrals, and it just kind of, started growing from there. And everything can grow from just one tiny little flame. And, you just have to keep adding fuel and feeding it. And it'll eventually, get to a point where you can make that decision and have that conversation with yourself about what would it look like if I did go out on my own. And I think a 9-to-5 is a perfect, healthy way to support that.
Yeah. And the reason I ask is because I love that so much. The reason I ask is because one of my friends, his grandpa is John Huntsman. He's the owner of Huntsman Corporation, $1 billion company. He gave away $1 billion before he passed away. And he gave his grandson the advice. He said, go work on someone else's dollar so you can make mistakes on their dollar. Kind of basically go learn from someone else and then go do your own thing. And what I found very interesting from what you just said is you weren't very intentional until 2 or 3 years ago. What happened 2 or 3 years ago that clicked?
Yeah, I think for me, it was myself achieving in the corporate world what I wanted to achieve. Like I said, I kept climbing the ladder. Opportunities kept coming my way. I'm super competitive in nature, so I would always say yes. There were jobs, quite honestly, I still don't think I was qualified for, but I was determined to find a way to succeed in those roles. And I did. And so what would happen though, shortly after taking it, I would get to a level, people would, give me acclamation and, tell me I was doing such a great thing and doing well in the role. And I just wasn't necessarily fulfilled in it. I got to the point where I felt like I mastered the skill and I was like, okay, what's next? And that's kind of how I'm wired. I've always had to be doing multiple things. Even when I had a day job, I was always tinkering or I was doing real estate or whatever it is. And so for me, it's like I think that personality trait helps in what I'm doing now because I have to manage so many different things. But, I think I'll say, I enjoyed growing my team and investing in people, but I never felt that was reciprocated at the top. And what I mean is by the CEO or by any C-level title that was working with me as a peer or whatever. Basically at the executive level, there's no such thing as too much sacrifice. It's expected, and I just no longer wanted that burden. And so I felt like I had run into that wall. And so that's where, for the last 2 or 3 years, I was starting to feel that pressure of just running into that wall of it's never going to be enough. It's always, what have you done for me lately? And that just wasn't something that I really wanted to do. I also wanted my sons to kind of see growing up. And, I look up to my father so much. He's run a construction business, a successful one, for about 40 years now. Not a blemish on his record. He's done amazing things scaling that business. And I've always looked up to him. Funny enough, he looked up to me when I was doing the corporate thing. And he was really proud of me doing that because he never took that path. But he knows now how much I thought of him and the road that he took to provide, and to be an entrepreneur. And now here I am emulating that. And so I think it'd be really fulfilling if one day my boys even want to emulate that. Not that, that's just a small kind of thing that I think about sometimes, but I feel like they can see and be proud of the fact that I'm building this from nothing. And, people might say, well, it's not nothing. You started with, whatever you started with. And, but I worked to get there and I took steps to put me in that place. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, starting out at $20 an hour at Apple as a contractor, and I was
thrilled. I got offered 3 times my salary to leave that job. And I literally contemplated it for a month because I loved being at Apple. It was so infectious. But obviously I left and I made the right decision and I grew. But yeah, it's funny where we start and then where we end up. And I think it's really important to audit yourself kind of along the way.
What do you mean by audit yourself along the way?
Just make sure you're celebrating your successes and make sure you're taking account of some of your failures, because one thing's true, people don't celebrate their accomplishments enough, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then the other thing's also true where people are a little bit too hard on themselves when they fail, because a lot of times people don't necessarily see the failure as a learning opportunity to basically not repeat that step or, whatever it may be. And so I think that's why it's important to just kind of check in with yourself every once in a while, every quarter or whatever, and just kind of do a mental audit of here's where I've come from, here's where I am, here's where I want to go, and take those steps that you think, literally write them down and take those steps and try to get there. Yeah.
We definitely look at things as a day or week perspective versus zooming out and being over 10 years. Is this going to matter? Or, hey, take a second to be a lot happier and maybe not as hard as on ourselves. A couple more questions and then I'll let you go. This has been super, super helpful. I personally love this. Like I said at the very beginning, I love this episode because these emotions are raw. This is month 1. And so just a few more questions. I don't know how close you are to your extended family and stuff, but how have your family and friends reacted to this transition? Have you got any criticism for, oh man, it's going to be harder than you think or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, there's skeptics, I think, in every walk of life. I would say just with my family and friends specifically, there's been a lot of people encouraging me to do this and to take this leap. So some people are just relieved that I finally actually listened and did it. But to your point, it's only been 1 month. So we might have to revisit this in 12 months and have another conversation to see how things are going.
For sure.
Because things, honestly, I feel super grateful. I know that God is opening doors for us to walk through because things are happening that probably just shouldn't happen. And so I know it has to, it's definitely coming from God. And this is a sign, just the way that all this kind of transpired. And so, everyone's been really supportive. My dad is kind of my biggest cheerleader. He's really, really excited that I've chosen in a way to kind of follow in his footsteps. And I think that's really rewarding for any father. And, my in-laws, my wife, everyone's been so supportive. So luckily I do have a good support system around me. I don't think really anyone's been skeptical or questioned the move. Everyone's just kind of celebrating it and seeing it as, hey, I wish I could do that. It's funny when you take that risk and people are like, hey, I wish I could do that. It's, well, you can if you want to. If you really, really want to, you can. You'll find a way.
Yeah. And well, I will say this. if someone's listening to this, I probably wouldn't expect as much support as Daniel gets. I hope you do, but I would say a lot of times you just don't. And mostly because people portray their beliefs on others. And so if you go and take the leap and someone says, you're crazy for doing that, you're going to fail. What they're really saying is, I would fail if I did that. And so I think you're going to fail. But as far as I'm sure you're going to build a team, you're going to build this up. I'm curious to hear your answer on this. This may be a little bit different, but you mentioned that when you were in your corporate job, you didn't feel like you got enough praise and recognition. It was just like, hey, I need more, I need more, I need more. How are you going to run your teams differently now that you run the show versus when you were working at your corporate job?
Yeah, that's literally, I mean, I ran my team so set apart that everybody knew that reported up to me. Our division, our group, whatever you want to call it, was so set apart from the rest of the organization because of my leadership style. So I think, I allow people to be autonomous. I believe that people can make their own decisions. And if I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to make sure that I look for those traits. That's just how I hire. I don't hire people to wait around for their hand to be held. And so that's number one, is just kind of making sure you hire the right people. Culturally, I really respect people's work-life balance. And so I feel like it's important for me to understand when are their birthdays, when are their children's birthdays, what life events do they coming up, and celebrating those alongside of them rather than just having them come in and punch a clock. This is about building relationships with people that are ultimately going to support your dream in building your business. And I really want people that are associated with me to have skin in the game, whether that means there's profit sharing exercises or equity splits or whatever it is. I'm looking at all those things. We're not quite there yet, but I'm planning to build that kind of culture in so that people have a sense of ownership and will manage it as if it was their own. So that if I'm growing, 2 or 3 other businesses, I don't necessarily have to be there every single day, and it's going to be just fine. So empowering people, hiring like-minded people, creating a culture where you prioritize, life over work. As long as the work's getting done, I want people to enjoy, their time off and their freedom and be as lenient as I can with that stuff. And so that's just kind of how I, build rapport with people. I sit down with them, and it's not, a boss employee level. It's very much equals. We're peers. That's how I've always managed people. That's how I'll continue to manage people.
I like that, dude. Actually, I'm super impressed with that. When you have someone who, you're giving them the autonomy and the flexibility that you would want, you're giving them that, and they're not quite performing, how do you handle that?
So one area I like to look out for is to make sure you're having regular cadences with these people, so those opportunities don't really have a chance to present themselves. You'll see, if you're inquisitive and you're looking for things, you'll see signs and symptoms of that type of behavior. And so one, I'm pretty good at rooting that out through the interview process, because it's not just a phone call and, an application and a resume. It's typically several phone calls, in-persons. I take it very seriously for 2 reasons when I hire people. One reason is because I take it very seriously if they're willing to come and work for me. That to me is one of the most rewarding things ever, because it says something about that person's trust and faith in my shepherding of them.
Totally.
And so I don't take that lightly at all. And then number 2, I want to make sure that I can fulfill them creatively and also career-wise. There's been instances where people have basically outworked worked themselves out of a job under my leadership. And I've literally told them, you need to go to the next level. You're ready to be a manager. I don't have a position for you, but I hear this company's hiring. You should go do it. Even though I don't want to lose you, your professional growth is more important than holding you back, and you need to go and pursue that. So I think if you lead from that perspective and you're looking for that type of talent and those types of personalities on your team, I don't necessarily know that you're going to run into the scenario that you came up with. Obviously, people need corrections from time to time, and life events happen, and people need encouragement, and they need to have energy, opportunities to create more energy and synergy in the business. And so I look for opportunities to take people out to dinner or take them on team builds, go bowling, whatever it is, whatever their specific interest is, and try to foster that so that they see it more as a relationship than just a job. And then in those events and in those sessions, those one-on-ones, I'm talking about what their aspirations are. How can I be more helpful to them? What can I do to make their job easier or more efficient? And so it's like I said, if you're building it that way, then your employees more than likely are going to come to you very honestly when there is an issue or when they're not feeling motivated. And so you can typically weed those scenarios out a lot faster that way.
That makes sense. Okay, last three questions. Well, yeah, three more questions and I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. This has been super, super cool. I love this. I want to do these more, this type of podcast. So hopefully if you're listening and you're at that spot where you've been scared, you have some actionable steps. I just want to clarify, Daniel, it sounds like from my perspective, what you're saying, and I would agree with this, if someone's wanting to break away from their 9 to 5, first thing is you got to invest in yourself after hours and just start doing the small things. Like you got your real estate license, you were listening to people outside of your industry, you were learning, you were growing. And then it sounds like you finally started getting those shoves of like, hey, no, you got to start figuring out your own thing. Is that what you would recommend? Would you add any steps to that?
No, the only step I would add is there are certain jobs out there. I'm not saying don't be a bad employee, definitely get your work done, but like you can listen to podcasts at work or on your lunch break or whatever. Like you don't have to wait for 5 o'clock. You can dive into things. You can read on your lunch break. You can find, but I think the bigger thing is, have those conversations with yourself and your spouse, if you have a spouse or whatever, people in your life that you trust and you go to when you make big decisions. And if you don't have people like that, there are several people like Kevin and myself you can reach out to, and we would love to help talk to you. Feel free to message me on Instagram. But my point is to start surrounding yourself. Be intentional with the types of people and personalities you surround yourself with, because what you'll find is there will be this natural kind of thing build within you where you'll start to want to either emulate these people or in your own kind of way, create a persona of yourself to start fulfilling these things. It'll just happen instinctively and naturally. So that's number one. I would just start surrounding yourselves by those types of like-minded people. But ask yourself the deep questions of what's going to fulfill you and what kind of path you want to go down, because a lot of people get freaked out with entrepreneurship and they think they have to go down 50 different, they look at a guy like Ryan Pineda and they're like, oh my gosh, he's doing 700 things. You don't start there. You start with one thing that you're super passionate about, you perfect that and you move on to the next thing. And so, yeah, I think for me, putting yourself around those types of people and those personalities and making sure that you're, putting in the time after hours or during hours or whatever you can, however you can squeeze it in to grow those skills and expand. That's what you have to do. Those are the very, 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 tip of the iceberg of kind of what you need to do.
Totally. 100%. It sounds like God played a huge role in your progress, mine as well. For those who are Christian or, of faith, how do you make sure God's a part of your decision in all of this?
Yeah. So, every big decision and small decision, I honestly approach it with prayer, and discernment. And this frustrates people sometimes. I am not a quick decision maker. I could have a killer deal. And I know in real estate, time kills all deals, but that's okay. I can live with that because I have to stay true to myself. But literally, I am very analytical. And so I kind of have to break myself of that. Like you could, over analyze, but I also feel like that's the time where I'm praying about things. I'm discerning whether or not I'm using wisdom. I'm bouncing things off of other people of faith that are believers and, want good things for me and my family, and consulting with my wife. And I think that that's how we approach it, is we invite God into our lives instead of, making the deals independently. That's just how I've always approached every big decision. And I'm trying to get better about approaching smaller decisions that way as well, because I find that it just gives me so much more peace and assurance and confidence that, okay, it literally, I can tell you a story about like being very price specific on a property, and we got exactly the number. And it was like, okay, like that's all I needed as a sign to say, hey, we're going to go for it. And that might sound petty to other people, but I think if you invite God into those conversations, you'll be surprised when he shows up, and you'll know when he shows up.
Totally. I've had those same experiences in my journey as well. Last question, man. Thank you so much. I didn't expect it to go this long, but this has just been
I'm having fun. We can keep going.
really cool conversation. But
Thanks for
last
asking.
question. So for those of you who want to get in touch, you can follow Daniel on Instagram. We'll have his Instagram here. I'm hoping he starts posting a lot more about his journey because
yes.
What stage you're at right now is very, very, very relatable. So I hope you start posting a lot about the ups and the downs. Last question. What does the fight against mediocrity mean to you?
Oh man, I was preparing for this one because I know you ask it to everybody. So I think I have a good answer. But before I answer, I'm going to get some help from my wife on my social. So expect new things to happen that way. She's going to run my social for me, and hopefully we'll grow the audience that way. But I think there's kind of the way I kind of look at this, it's kind of like the fight against mediocrity at the highest level to me. It's really about breaking the social norms of, waking up, going to work, coming home, eating dinner, and doing the same thing all over again. I'm trying to be really intentional about the life I want to lead, and I want to create those generational opportunities that I talked about where my legacy will matter. I want to coach my kids in basketball and be available to people and volunteering and those types of things. And what I've learned about the corporate world is oftentimes, we talked about you're exchanging money and time for more and more sacrifice, and it doesn't necessarily always equate to what you thought it might have. So for me, this whole thing is about venturing off to control my own destiny. So really that's what it means to me is, I'm a hard worker, I'm willing to bet on myself, and I want to control my own destiny. It's like, I try to equate everything to like a sports reference, specifically basketball. So it's like Kobe Bryant with 5 seconds in the game. He wants the ball. He's going to take the shot. I want the ball. That's what the fight against mediocrity is to me.
Dude, that's awesome. I love that. It's interesting because what you said, the fight against mediocrity and create your own economy goes so hand in hand. It's like, I'm going to fight mediocrity so that I can create my own economy. Anyways, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Daniel. You're a stud. I'm super excited to see your journey. We'll stay in touch, man.
Thanks so much for having me.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on the way.